Welcome to another episode of NBA 2K20 roster edits with Remember the Great Sports. Today we're going to look at the Sacramento Kings, but before that they were named the Kansas City Kings, and before that they were the Cincinnati Royals, and even before that they were called the Rochester Royals. What a lot of people don't realize is the Kings franchise, then the Rochester Royals, were one of the original NBA teams to start the league back in the 1940s. So we're going to go way back. I'm going to add some players from the Rochester Royals to this team, and we're going to talk about this franchise. Alright, so the stock roster is actually pretty decent. You have Oscar Robertson, point guard. Nate Archibald, a backup point guard. Mitch Richmond, shooting guard. Jerry Lucas, power forward. Another power forward in Chris Webber. DeMarcus Cousins, center. Peja Stojaković. Vlade Divac. Otis Birdsong, who was part of the Kansas City Kings. Mike Bibby. Reggie Theus. Kevin Martin. Jason Williams. Tyreke Evans. And Doug Christie. So I'm going to make 4 subtractions and additions to this lineup, and the 4 people that I am adding to this lineup actually all are Hall of Famers. So because of that glaring reason, some of the players that I'm deleting are not Hall of Fame caliber players, so these guys move ahead of them on the list. So the first recommendation of deletion, you start from the back: Doug Christie, Tyreke Evans, Jason Williams. I leave Kevin Martin and Reggie Theus alone, and Mike Bibby, and then I remove Otis Birdsong. Well, the reason I remove Otis Birdsong, it's not that he wasn't a great player, but we already have some shooting guard types on this team, in Mitch Richmond and Kevin Martin. So I suppose if you would rather keep Otis Birdsong ahead of Kevin Martin, that would work. Also, Reggie Theus can play the shooting guard and the point guard. So let's see if you agree with my roster additions. Alright, so the starting point guard is Oscar Robertson, no shock there. At your starting shooting guard, Hall of Famer Mitch Richmond. At your small forward, probably soon to be Hall of Famer Peja Stojaković. He's not in there yet, but he could arguably be in there soon. Power forward, Jerry Lucas, and he goes back to the Cincinnati Royals days. DeMarcus Cousins at center, Boogie himself. Backup point guard, Nate Tiny Archibald. Backup power forward / center, Chris Webber. And this is the first one added to the list. And this is one of the Cincinnati Royals. And this is Jack Twyman. Jack Twyman was a go-to small forward on the Royals back in the 1950s. He was a very good scorer for a long time for that team. Good career overall with the Cincinnati franchise. Hall of Famer. So he's the backup small forward. Next on that list, Vlade Divac at the backup center. Kevin Martin, you keep at the shooting guard. And again, I mentioned Otis Birdsong. If you'd rather have Otis Birdsong ahead of Kevin Martin, that's perfectly fine. However, Kevin Martin can play the small forward position as well if needed. So he's a little bit bigger than Birdsong. I leave Mike Bibby as a backup point guard. Then I also leave Reggie Theus on there as a point guard, but there's a small asterisk behind this. He's kind of the backup shooting guard, or backup shooting guard. So you can move Kevin Martin to small forward, Reggie Theus to shooting guard. But regardless, Theus belongs on the team in my opinion. And that brings me to the next addition to the lineup. And this guy doesn't get a lot of minutes. And this is the backup center / power forward, Wayne Embry. And Wayne Embry, a Hall of Famer again, played for the Cincinnati Royals when they were very successful. Very good player. He was kind of a rebounding, scoring type center. He was, very good defensively, very good as a rebounder as well. So it's a perfect 13th player to have on the bench. And with that said, the very next guy, Arnie Risen, who also is a Hall of Famer, was on the Rochester Royals, I believe, before they moved to Cincinnati. But Arnie goes way back to the early 1950s, And him and Wayne Embry are kind of interchangeable. They're both same type of player. They're kind of an undersized center in today's game, but they can play the power forward or the center position. And it's a good guy to have as your 13th man coming off the bench. They can fill either of those spots. So really, Embry and Risen are interchangeable. And finally, this is Bob Davies. And a lot of people may not even recognize this name because this guy played in the 1940s for the Royals franchise. And he was the point guard on their teams. He's in the Hall of Fame. He has so many categories that he excelled in while he played for the Royals back in the 1940s and early 50s. And that's why I dropped Jason Williams, because this guy's a Hall of Famer, where Jason Williams isn't. I don't put him in the starting lineup, but I suppose, the starting 13, I should say. But I suppose you could swap him out with Mike Bibby, if that's what you'd like to do. However, I leave Bibby just a notch ahead of this player, Bob Davies. But he's definitely a very good player. So, who coaches this team? Rick Adelman. Again, I apologize about the picture. It's not a real good picture of him. That's all I had to work with. So, Rick Adelman has the most wins as a head coach with the franchise. And I think that's the most relevant person to have coaching this team. So hopefully you agree with my starting lineups here and my roster subtractions and additions. I actually thought about doing just a Royals team, starting with the Cincinnati with Jerry Lucas and Oscar Robertson, and going all the way back to the Bob Davies originally in Rochester. So I might do that in the future, but for now I combined the teams together in the all-time Sacramento Kings franchise. So thank you for joining me for another episode, and tell me what you think.